What's happening? Welcome to Throwing Stones alongside Ryan Griffin. I'm Matt Bassin. And if you don't know by now, you definitely should know. We talking hoops. And before we get into everything regarding the NBA Finals that are kicking off this Thursday, got to remind you guys to like and subscribe everywhere you can find us. That would be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, full episodes on YouTube, as well as DetroitSportsNation.com. All right, Ryan, one of our first shows happened in early March. About March 16th was the last time the Golden State Warriors and Boston Celtics battled it out. And in the second quarter, Steph and Clay were near a loose ball. And Marcus Smart comes diving in out of nowhere, goes for the ball, rolls over Steph's foot, knocks Steph out for the rest of the regular season. That was one of our first shows. Here we are, roundabout way, months later, and the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors are about to duke it out for the NBA Finals.
Yeah, life is a funny way of working out like that. And I think out of all four of the conference finals teams that we had, this is the best possible outcome and the best possible matchup. Being the finals, obviously these teams have only played each other twice in the regular season. And you really can't take anything away from either one of those games because the first one was a week before Christmas that the Warriors won. But the Celtics didn't have Derek White yet. And Al Horford and somebody else important didn't play. Maybe Rob Williams, maybe Marcus Smart, so something like that. And then in the second game, you just mentioned it, Marcus Smart hurt Steph Curry. So, obviously, you have to throw that one out the window, too. And they say, it's like styles make fights in boxing. So I'm really excited to see what these two teams can give us because I don't think they play similar really at all. I mean, I guess they both shoot a lot of three-pointers, but that's about it. I think they have a lot of different ways of scoring, a lot of different ways of attacking, different strengths, weaknesses, all of that stuff that we're going to get into. But I'm really excited to see the adjustments that come out of the series because I think both coaches are very good. And like I said, they don't really have a whole lot of tape on each other as it pertains to playing yourself. Again, nothing that I would even think you could take away from either one of the two games that they played in the regular season. And the teams that they've played in the playoffs, I don't really think that Golden State has played a team really like Boston. And I don't think that Boston has really played a team like Golden State. Maybe the the Nets in some ways, but not really because I think the Nets are just a way worse version of what Golden State is trying to do, and they don't even do it all that well, and sometimes they don't do it at all. So I'm really excited to see this series and matchup play out. And I didn't think we were going to get a whole lot of blowouts in the Eastern Conference Finals, and we obviously did. But I don't see a whole lot of blowouts coming from this series, and it's going to be a bunch of people, like us, whatever basketball analysts, talking heads, whatever you want to call them, trying to predict what I feel like is honestly the unpredictable in this NBA Finals.
No, absolutely. And like you said, you can't take anything away from these first two games. First game, December 17th at Boston, the Warriors won, but the Warriors were without Jordan Poole and Klay Thompson, and the Celtics were without Al Horford and Grant Williams, and obviously without Derek White because that trade had not taken place yet. So you can't take anything away from that one. And then in the second game, we know about Steph and Marcus Smart. Draymond Green didn't play much. It was his second game back, coming back from a back injury. So there really isn't much to take from these two games. And you are absolutely right. Neither one of these teams has seen anything like their opponent they're about to see. The Warriors did not see a defense anywhere close to what the Boston Celtics bring to the table. And the Boston Celtics haven't seen an offense anywhere close to what the Golden State Warriors bring to the table. Interesting enough, fun facts to take with you from these upcoming NBA Finals. This is the first NBA Finals since 1996 where the top two teams in defensive efficiency are squaring off. The Celtics are number one at 106.2. The Dubs are number two at 106.6. Last time that happened was the Bulls and the Sonics. It's also the first Finals where one team has all the experience and the other team has none. Not a single minute played in an NBA Finals for the Boston Celtics. Meanwhile, on the Golden State Warriors, thanks to Steph, Clay, and Draymond. There are 123 games of finals experience between the players on the Golden State Warriors. The last time that discrepancy happened was the year later, 1997, where the Bulls had 134 games played in finals experience and the Jazz had absolutely zero. One thing you might be able to take away a little bit going into this is that the Celtics are the only team with a winning record against the Steve Kerr Golden State Warriors. They have a 9-7 record since 2014 and 7-3 in their last 10 games, Ryan.
Yeah, so I think the 7-3 is probably more important than the since 2014 or 15 when Kerr ended up taking over, because now all these players are on that team in these last 10 games, which is the last 5 years since the Warriors have been champions, really. And Marcus Smart's done a really good job on Stephen Curry. I think he's 29% when Marcus Smart is the closest defender, which is like the best in the league for a defensive player against Steph Curry. And I just think there are matchups all over the place that I'm interested to see, because I think, Steph will have a tough time with Marcus Smart. Obviously, Marcus Smart is very good on defense. He won Defensive Player of the Year. And then you have Jaylen Brown, defending Klay Thompson, which I think is going to be a whole hell of a task as well. Probably throw Tatum on there to, Tatum on Wiggins. And I think they can just match up with what the Warriors want to do, honestly, and, vice versa. When guys like Jordan Poole or something come in, I don't really think there's any hiding in this series. You can probably get away with throwing your worst defender on Draymond because he's not going to go to the basket or is really a threat to shoot. But I think it's going to be more so a matchup of like IQs than it might be who's just able to outman the other team. Because if I'm the Warriors, I am worried about how my offense is going to match up. I think the offense is going to be able to score points because they're just really good at it. But again, you have a capable defender on Wiggins. You're going to have a capable defender on Clay. You're going to have one on Steph, and then Jordan Poole when he comes in the game too. So I think it's just going to be more difficult than they've seen in these past 3 series that they've been in to get their offense going and to make shots. And then if you're going to attack the rim, you have guys like Al Horford and Robert Williams down there who can make that more difficult as well. And the Celtics are really good at not giving up 3-pointers. So it's interesting to see where the Warriors shots are going to come from. And when they get those shots, are they going to be able to knock them down?
Yeah. Defensively speaking, Warriors haven't seen anything like what the Boston Celtics bring to the table. In Game 5 of the Western Conference Finals, the Dallas Mavericks switched on defense 63% of the time. That was out of desperation. The Celtics switch 45% of the time because they know what they're doing. There is a big difference, and the Warriors are going to have to find a way to get their buckets, and they have the offense to do it. And this is a fast-paced, free-flowing, move-the-ball tempo, and that leads to open shots, open runouts, and it also leads to turnovers. The Celtics don't really have a ball handler. Their stars are definitely not their ball handlers. We've seen how sloppy Tatum and Brown can both be with handling the ball. Same thing with Marcus Smart. I guess Derek White most of the time when he's in would be it, but they don't really have a consistent ball handler on their own, and we've seen their turnover issues as well. Both of these teams have the ability to cough the ball up again and again, and I think that's going to play a huge factor in these NBA Finals and how they are going to go. If one team figures out a way to really take control of the ball and not turn it over 15 times a game, which they are both averaging around, then that team is going to have a huge advantage. You are absolutely right. The Celtics have a size advantage. There's no question. And the task for the Dubs is to figure out, are they going to have to rely on Kevon Looney? Are they going to have to rely on Otto Porter Jr., who should be making his way back? Health plays a big factor on their defense because Iguodala is one of their better defenders. He hasn't played a lick in the playoffs yet. They're hoping Gary Payton II is able to be back in time for these finals. He should be. They're saying he's practicing this week. so we will see. But there's a lot of health issues on the Dubs side defensively. We've seen the health issues as well for the Boston Celtics. Marcus Smart, a quad and then an ankle. Robert Williams, a meniscus tear he had surgery on, and then a bone bruise in the Eastern Finals. Al Horford's had some health issues as well. So there's a lot to play involved in what's going to happen in these NBA Finals regarding just the health of each team.
Yeah. And even on the other side, I hope these guys are able to come back healthy. I think Gary Payton II would be an amazing addition for the Warriors if he's able to come back and then provide anything for them and play like he's relatively healthy, just to give them another defender that they can put on a guy like Marcus Smart or Jason Tatum or even Derek White, which is why I think the matchup from Golden State's defensive side is interesting, because nobody's going to say that Steph Curry is a lockdown defender, although he's been really good in these playoffs, actually. But if you're going to put him, you can't necessarily hide him on defense, right? So you're probably going to end up putting him on Marcus Smart, because he's not going to be, as aggressive as Jason Tatum or something, but he just might be. One thing Marcus Smart isn't, shy to do is shoot the ball. In their Game 7 win against the Heat, he took the most shots out of any of the Celtics players. So if you put Steph on him, that he's probably, he's going to have the strength advantage, and he's probably going to try and take him to the rack. He's probably going to try and shoot. So these guys are going to have to work on defense. So whether you're throwing Draymond or Wiggins on Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, I'm sure Clay is going to get some of that action as well. It's, who's going to guard who? They have Robert Williams still to deal with. They have Al Horford, who can stretch the floor. And even, again, a guy like Derek White coming in, who isn't always aggressive, but when he is, he's pretty good. So I'm going to be interested to see how this series comes down to Golden State's defense, and especially what they do with Jordan Poole, because I don't know who you're going to have Poole guard, because, like I said, I think both of the Celtics' main guards, being Derek White and Marcus Smart, are aggressive enough to expose Jordan Poole a little bit. And I don't know that the Celtics are going to, be playing like Peyton Pritchard all that much, where that you can just throw Jordan Poole in and say, okay, go guard him, because we know he's not about to do anything. So for Poole, I think he'll be obviously one of the X factors for the Warriors. And it's just going to be, how much do they trust him to play? They obviously trust his offense, but if he's going to be exposed like that on defense, how bad is it going to be? Is it even going to happen? Because the Celtics might just end up missing their shots, and then maybe the Warriors can escape with a game or two. They're certainly better at home than they are on the road, although they've only lost 4 games total in the playoffs, but 9-0 at home in the playoffs. So for the Warriors, it's just interesting to me how they're going to deal with the Celtics, being that they do have some aggressive guards, a lot like Memphis did, obviously, with Ja and Desmond Bane, although Ja wasn't there for all the games. So it ended up being a little bit different. And I'm just interested to see how that's going to happen, how they're going to be able to deal with the size that the Celtics can bring inside, whether it's Al Horford, Robert Williams, or even Jason Tatum.
Defensively, Marcus Smart on Steph Curry is a huge boost for the Celtics. At least it has been in the past. It's a little different story when you have to deal with this back-to-back games and you're trying to win, 4 out of 7. Is Steph going to run Marcus Smart into the ground offensively, where Marcus Smart's not going to be nearly as effective on his offense if he's so exhausted from trying to follow Steph Curry everywhere? I don't think Marcus Smart is going to stay on Steph Curry the whole time. They're going to pick their spots when it comes to him. Marcus Smart is big enough to be guarding Clay, who doesn't move like Steph Curry does, to guard Wiggins at times when Wiggins decides he doesn't want to, be aggressive and take it to the rack. So there's different ways you can use Marcus Smart. Obviously, Tatum and Brown bring their defensive capabilities. Robert Williams, his health really plays a factor. If he's good to go, that's a huge boost for the Celtics. If his knee and his bone bruise is still really bothering him, he's not nearly as effective defensively, and he's only going to play about 12 minutes a game, so you don't have to worry as much. And then obviously we've looked on the Dubs side of things defensively. A whole lot of questions on if Iguodala, Gary Payton, and Otto Porter Jr. are even going to play in this series. And then Jordan Poole, huge defensive liability. Probably the worst defender in this series is Jordan Poole. Andrew Wiggins just got done taking as much of the responsibility as anybody for shutting down Luka Doncic. Well, Jason Tatum is a different player than Luka Doncic, and so it's going to be interesting to see how Wiggins is involved in that matchup, how Draymond Green's involved in that matchup, going back and forth between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and then having to deal with Al Horford as well. If they're going to go small and Draymond's your 5, the Dubs are going to have to figure something out. They figured it out with Doncic whenever Steph was involved. They'd let Steph kind of leak towards Luka to kind of slow him down so that his main defender could get back involved in the play and then run back out to guard the three-point shooter that Luka's, most likely going to pass to if he doesn't get his own shot. You might have to deal with the same thing with Steph in this situation, where if it's Tatum or Brown in that same situation, he's going to have to do the same thing. There's so many questions. It's such an unknown in this final, and I love it personally as a basketball fan to not be able to come into this finals and say this team is going to win and here's why. We've seen, we've been lucky enough when teams are both healthy to end up with good finals, and we've also been unlucky enough where, the Warriors lose, KD and then Clay, and, that series was essentially over. We were just waiting for when the Raptors were actually going to close it out. I am hopeful that we get a healthy series as possible. It's going to be interesting for the Celtics, who have just come off back-to-back 7-game series, dealing with injuries as well as dealing with exhaustion. They're going to get breaks. The NBA Finals, they stretch it out longer. It's no back-to-back games or anything like that. You usually have 2 days of breaks in between their games. So there's going to be time for players to get some more rest and attention to whatever nagging injuries they have. But, I think the Warriors should be the better looking team in game 1 because they're going to have a lot more rest than the Celtics have, and they're coming off a lot less games than the Celtics have had to deal with.
Yeah, the Celtics back-to-back 7-game series, and that's why, as much as I think it is unpredictable, I think I'm sort of leaning Warriors only because the Celtics, very well could have lost either of the last 2 series, and I don't think anybody would have been really shocked if you said they were going to lose before the series started. I think if they were going to lose to Miami in the fashion that it looked like they were going to lose to Miami, that would have been one of the most shocking losses of all time in a Game 7. But I don't know. The Celtics feel like, they both feel like they're complete teams. Obviously, they're in the finals. But it still almost feels like that there's something missing with the Celtics in that they gave away games against Milwaukee and Miami, and you figure that they probably can't do that against the Warriors. And for the Warriors to have the first 2 games at home where they've been undefeated this postseason, I feel like they should be up 2-0 going into Game 3, and I'm sure they're going to be disappointed if they're not up 2-0 regardless. But Game 1, they're going to have more rest, not just for the game between the last game of the conference finals and the first game of the finals, but just in general, like we mentioned, back-to-back 7-game series for the Celtics. So the Warriors should be better rested, and I think at least they should carry that over into the first 2 games. I think and maybe they're a little bit of a better team as well. But if you're the Warriors, you got to really seize the opportunity, at least to me, to go up 2-0, because I think the Celtics coming off back-to-back grueling series should play a huge factor in not only the first games, but if you start to get to a Game 6 or Game 7 of the finals, the Celtics' legs are just going to be more tired, and I think the Warriors should look to take advantage of that.
I absolutely agree. And the Celtics are, I don't know how good of a historical list this is to be on, but there have been 18 teams in NBA history to win multiple Game 7s in the same postseason. Only the 1988 Lakers have won 3 Game 7s. So if it has to go to a Game 7, if they win it, they're joining great company in that one. Also, they're only the second team since the first round went to 7 to have a better road record than a home record going into the NBA Finals. They are 7-2 on the road and 5-4 at home. So for whatever reason, the Boston Garden has not been kind to its own team. The 2016-17 Cavs were 7-0 on the road and 5-1 at home before reaching the NBA Finals. So the Celtics know how to win on the road. They know how to make life much more difficult for themselves than it needs to be. And we've seen that happen in the last few games against Milwaukee. We saw that happen in the last few games against Miami as well. With the Warriors being the Warriors, that's not a position you want to be in. You don't want to make your life any more difficult than it already has to be to try and defeat the Golden State Warriors. This is a team that looks like they are clicking on pretty much all cylinders for dealing with the injuries they're dealing with. The guys who are healthy are clicking pretty well. Andrew Wiggins has been a huge boost to them this year, and he's only stepped his game up in the postseason. He's kind of becoming what we were hoping he'd be when he entered the NBA. And, you talked about it when we were talking about draft picks. If he wasn't the number one pick, he might not have gotten nearly a harsh a light put on him. But because he was a number one pick, he was early labeled as a bust because he wasn't doing what people thought a number one pick should do. But he is making the most of his time in Golden State offensively and especially defensively. And, I think as far as X factors are concerned, he's definitely got to be on the list for the Golden State Warriors. If they are going to win this series, he has to play a very large piece of this pie.
Yeah, and it's, asking somebody who's never been in the finals to do that. And the same might have to be asked for Jordan Poole. And the Warriors obviously have more finals experience, like you brought up earlier. But they have a lot of important players on their team who have never played in the finals before and who are sort of new to the playoffs just in general. And they've handled that well so far. But the finals are, of course, a bigger stage than what they've been dealing with. So you just hope that they can, or that the veterans can kind of coach them into it at least a little bit and they can still be effective. Whereas on the Celtics, they have nobody who's been in the finals, but they have a bunch of guys who have made quote-unquote deep playoff runs. They've been in the Eastern Conference Finals Game 7 before in 2018 when they lost to LeBron and the Cavs, and they were in this conference finals, obviously going to Game 7 in back-to-back series. So I think it's a little bit different levels of experience, obviously, where the Warriors look like they have way more experience on paper, but they still have a couple of key important pieces who are total wild cards in the spot. And then whereas the Celtics, you could fairly say that everybody is a total wild card in the spot. But I also think they have some weird sort of like veteran experience just from being in so many playoff games before, and both the highs and the lows of losing Game 7 or losing to the Heat or losing to the Bucks, to have that, revenge tour that I've seen it called from all the teams that they beat in this series, the Nets, or in this playoffs, the Nets, the Bucks, and the Heat are all teams that they've lost to in the last 3 playoffs, I believe, and then they're able to beat them all, and now they're, on this mountaintop trying to claim the final prize of the NBA championship against the Warriors. So I really think it's a toss-up, honestly, and for the Celtics to have to deal with Golden State. They've been a better road team, but again, Golden State undefeated at home, although their home court advantage at the Chase Center isn't quite what it was at Oracle. So even though I think the fans are going to be loud at Chase, it's not going to be like we saw it against, when they're in the finals against the Cavs, or even when they were in there against the Raptors. Even though they lost that series, the Oracle was still rocking. And then, this is Boston's first championship that they've been in since they had Garnett, Ray Allen, and Pierce. So I think those fans will take it up to even a different level than they've taken it to in any of these playoff series that they've seen when they've had things to root against, right? They had Kyrie to root against, and boy, did they. And then they had Giannis to root against, and then they finally had this opportunity to take it and go to the finals, and then, root against the Heat, who I know they don't have the big 3 anymore, but it was a team that knocked them out of really like their last chance to make the NBA finals when they had a legitimate shot in 2012. So I think Boston will bring it in terms of like the home fans, and I think the Warriors will too. It's really just, who can take that game on the road, honestly. And if it goes to Game 7, maybe Golden State doesn't have to, but that's asking them to still be perfect from home like they've been all postseason, and that's just a really tall task and probably an unfair ask of a team who's already given you so much as like the home fans to root for.
Yeah, I know. We made a at least, brought up the stat and talked about it, and it's definitely a talking point as far as finals experience. But this isn't the same thing as the Super Bowl, where your AFC, NFC championship game experience doesn't fully correlate to how it is in the Super Bowl because it's one venue, one day, and it's a whole different animal. This is teams going back and forth between arenas they played in and are used to playing in. And I think playing in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, not the same, obviously, as the NBA Finals, but it's a very big stage, and you get a lot of experience from that. And then an NBA Finals experience, if your coach has some, I think that mitigates a bunch of what the players don't have. And Ime Udoka has gone with the San Antonio Spurs. He is an assistant coach who just won the title last year with the Milwaukee Bucks. They have NBA Finals experience as a coaching staff, while they might not have it as a playing group. But like you said, with Marcus Smart and Tatum and Brown and Al Horford, who have been to Eastern Conference Finals before. Yes, they didn't get the job done until this year to actually make the NBA Finals, but I think having been to that big of a stage, which, yes, is a step below the NBA Finals, but it's a big enough stage that you see how they act and how they react in these situations, that it shouldn't be that much of a discrepancy. I don't think we're going to see a giant, oh my God, deer in headlights feeling from the Boston Celtics in these NBA Finals. Yes, the Warriors have that more experience, and I think it will show at times. What's going to show more at times is just what we've seen from these Boston Celtics in clutch moments throughout this playoff run. There have been plenty of times where they haven't got the job done. And so that's what I'm looking to see, is that when they get in the same situation in the NBA Finals, is Marcus Smart going to go to hero ball and ruin the game? Or anyone for that matter on the Celtics. Are they going to stop passing the ball and playing like a team and using what got them to this position in the first place and go to, I've got to do something for this team right now, which more often than not doesn't work out for you. Yes, it creates the highlight reels that we all get to watch for years later on down the road, but more often than not, you're not getting a win out of it because you're putting it all on your shoulders instead of playing team basketball, which is what got you here in the first place. There's so many unknowns. There's so many things we don't know about both these teams facing each other because they really don't have any experience against each other. They didn't face anyone like each other to get here. And all of this, to me, makes this an even better NBA Finals because we don't know any of this. It's so different from when we had to watch the Warriors and the Cavs go year in and year out against each other, and we knew somewhat what to expect with them facing each other. And for two teams that have come from where they had to come from to get here, the Warriors 2 years ago were the worst team in basketball. No Klay Thompson. KD is gone. Steph gets injured. Nothing. And then the year after that, they had two chances to get into the playoffs, 2 play-in games. They lost both of them. Again, no Klay Thompson. The man missed 900-plus days of basketball before getting back to where he was. And then the Celtics, had been so close, couldn't get it done. And then this year, new head coach, and you're 25-25 at the 50-game mark. It's not looking like a good season to go on a historical run, leading into the All-Star break and then post-All-Star break to get to where they are now. And then, of course, just the storied franchises. The Celtics are the top 2 storied franchise in NBA history. It's them and the Lakers, and you, depending on where you live, you're going to put one over the other. The Golden State Warriors had a semi-storied franchise early on with big names like Wilt and Rick Barry, and then nothing for a long time. They had Run TMC and the We Believe, but that was really it until this homegrown group of Steph, Klay, and Draymond kind of led this whole new, regime, and then Steve Kerr taking over from Mark Jackson and giving the players a coach they actually want to listen to and like to listen to, and then they've just been on this semi-dynastic run as well. It's a lot of fun, and I think we're going to have a very fun finals out of it. And my haterade in me as a Detroit Piston LA Laker fan is there's not a chance in hell I am rooting for the Boston Celtics, and I want them to lose, and I want to confidently say that the Warriors are going to beat them in 5 games. I can't confidently say that as much as I want to because this Celtics team knows how to play defense. They have a bona fide star in Jason Tatum. They have a great secondary star in Jaylen Brown. They have good role reserve pieces around them that do their job more often than not really well. I think the Warriors are a better team. I don't know it for sure, and that's why I'm looking so much at health playing a factor, because if one team can stay healthy and the other one can't, that's going to decide it. If one team can find a way to stop turning the ball over so damn much and the other one can't, that's going to decide it. I hope it's the players that decided on the floor. I hope they're all healthy to do it, and I hope we're in for a historic NBA Finals, because nothing would make me happier than having a 7-game series and watching the Boston Celtics cry at Chase Center at the end of it all with the Golden State Warriors and our Michigan State Spartan brethren Draymond Green getting ring number 4.
And I think there's just probably things that scare you about both teams, but things that excite you about both teams too. I think Boston's offense, especially when it comes down to like crunch time, can be really ineffective. And we've seen Marcus Smart try and shoot them out of games, and we've seen guys just stand around and try to watch Tatum take over the game and not really, have any interest in playing team basketball. And the Warriors, they turn the ball over a lot. I mean, I guess so do the Celtics, but for the Warriors, they always feel like they're just, I don't know, maybe like an inch away. And I also have concerns about like their athleticism as it pertains like, against Boston's, where, I don't think Klay Thompson's near the defender that he used to be. So I'm a little bit worried about kind of who he's going to be tasked to guard and how are they going to deal with, the Celtics on the inside and even just athletically. I think they're a smarter team. And like I said, I think the Warriors are probably going to win the series. But I think there's really strong cases to be made for both teams. And I know the Warriors are favored in Vegas, but I would honestly have it as close to a pick 'em as it is. I think they're minus 160 right now, so not some type of overwhelming favorite. But I think I'd bring that down. I think the Celtics have a real shot to win the series.
I absolutely do. And it's especially if if they steal a game, one of the first two on the road, and are able to hold court at home, so it doesn't even matter if they lose game 5, because they're not a 2-3-2, right? It's 2-2-1-1-1 again.
Yeah, let me make sure before we start to say
game
stuff.
6 is in Boston. I'm almost positive. Yeah, I know, but I'm almost positive game 6 is in Boston. So if the Celtics find a way to steal game 1 or 2, and they are actually able to hold court at home, something they really haven't been able to do in these NBA, playoffs this year. But let's just say for hypotheticals, so it doesn't even matter if they lose game 5 on the road at Golden State. They're still going home up 3-2 in game 6. Yes, they just blew this chance against Miami. That Miami-Boston series is one of the weirdest weirdest sports series, 7-game series I've ever seen in my life. Like, I cannot make heads or tails out of what I saw from that series. One thing made sense for so long, and then it didn't. Jimmy Butler was hurt after game 2, and that's why he didn't look good in game 3, 4, and 5. He was magically perfectly healed for game 6 to drop 47 points and 9 and 8 and whatever else he threw at them in game 6 in Boston, and then, looked great for 3 quarters for Miami, even though the rest of the team didn't look that great, and then disappeared in the 4th quarter of Game 7 at home. So nothing makes sense in that series for me. So I don't know what to take from that series, but Boston definitely wasn't able to hold court at home. So I don't know what this all leads into my giant confusion. I want to say a hypothetical of, they go home up 3-2. They should feel pretty good about closing it out in game 6. Well, you just had that chance with Miami and you absolutely blew it. So can I really say that? There's just so much unknown on the Boston Celtics side of things. When they are playing well, when their defense is doing what it does, it is really, really hard to score on them. And they are a much bigger team than the Golden State Warriors. And they have ways to exploit that size difference. The Warriors, I think they have more talent overall, especially if you just take away the top 2 names on each team, and then you look at the rest of the list. I think the Warriors blow the Celtics out of the water when it comes to names and talent. But none of that really matters in the end. It's just matters about who plays better team basketball. Oh, come on. You want to run this list?
Yeah, man, it's pretty close.
If we take Tatum and Brown out, and Steph and Clay out.
Yeah, then you have
Tatum and Brown
Smart
and
and
Steph and
Draymond.
Clay and throw them out.
They're just pretty close.
You've got Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole, who are playing much better basketball than anybody on the Celtics right now, not named Marcus Smart.
Good ball.
This year I'm talking about, the full year. Horford's giving you like 7 points and 10 rebounds. Come on.
I mean, Draymond would probably be second over Clay anyway. But I mean, no, Derek White's been really good. Grant Williams has been good.
Okay, so then fine. So then they have been good in stretches, and Robert Williams was good when he was healthy as well. They've been good in stretches. I'm talking about for the full season. I think the Warriors have better role players throughout them than what the Boston Celtics have.
Well, I mean, the role players had to play more during the season.
We can do that.
Klay Thompson was out. And Marcus Smart tried to injure Steph Curry.
Well, and that's another thing. The Celtics really only run about 8 deep in the postseason.
That's all you need, baby.
They don't have the bodies for that right now to run just 8 deep. Robert Williams' knee is not good. That bone bruise is not good. There's a reason he's only playing 12 minutes. He's got to get healthy over these next few days. Grant Williams plays big, yes, for his size. But, you're going to throw him out there for the whole game? You're going to throw Derek White out there for the whole game?
Grant Williams won in game 7.
Now you're losing your size advantage.
So, I don't know. I think it's pretty even.
I'm just saying.
Is what I
think the Warriors have advantage in player personnel. But none of that matters. When you have the right guys playing and the right team playing the right way, that's what matters in the end. And the Boston Celtics, when they are all clicking and doing what it needs to be done and doing it well, they are very, very good with a defense that hasn't been seen much over the last 10 years of basketball. So it's so hard to make of this. I don't know for the life of me who's going to win this series. I think it's the Golden State Warriors, but I have no idea if it's in 6 games or 7. And I would not be stunned if it's the Celtics winning it in 6 or 7. It's just there's so many outside factors at play. The turnovers, the health. It's just there's so many things that I understand these things play a factor in general in sports. But when you've seen what's gotten us here at this point, especially with the Celtics on the health side, the turnovers on both sides, you're seeing glaring examples of how this is all going to play a factor into these NBA finals.
Dubs in 7, baby.
Okay.
Steph Finals
so if
MVP.
The Dubs win in 7. Well, I mean, he got the All-Star Game MVP this year. He got the Magic Johnson Western Conference Finals MVP this year. So to add a actual Finals MVP, he's got 3 out of the 4 MVPs this year. Be a pretty good year for Steph Curry. But let's say this all does come to fruition, and the Golden State Warriors win a 4th NBA championship with this group. You now have 4 NBA titles for Steph, Klay, and Draymond. You now have 4 NBA titles as a head coach to go along with, 5 that Steve Kerr as a player had, right? I think he had 3 with the second 3-peat Bulls and 2 with the Spurs.
I thought he had 1 with the Spurs.
No, I think he has 2. I think he has 5 NBA championships because he won one with the Spurs the next year in '99.
Iguodala would have 4.
And I think he was with them in 2003. Iguodala would have 4. So, we know Steph's going into the Hall of Fame. That's a foregone conclusion. Does Steve Kerr get into the Hall of Fame as a head coach by winning his 4th? Does Klay lock up his Hall of Fame with a 4th to go along with what he used to be? And we don't know what he's going to end up being still going forward. Hopefully he ends up, not being a complete shell of his former self. Does Draymond get in with the defensive numbers, the All-Star numbers, and the NBA Finals, 4 of those? Does Andre Iguodala get in with 4 NBA Finals, the defensive numbers, the All-Star numbers, the fact that he used to be the man in Philadelphia as well? Like how many of these guys are going to end up getting into the Hall out of this quote-unquote dynasty?
Well, I think Steph's already in. I think Steve Kerr's already in as a coach. And I think Draymond is a better case than Klay does for the Hall of Fame. Right now, just given his defensive accolades, the All-Star games, it's not such a wide difference. And even regular All-NBA, I think Draymond's made 2 of those teams and Klay's maybe made 4 of them. But so I think Draymond has a better case. And if you look at the Hall of Fame probability on Basketball Reference, Draymond is above Klay's at 57%, while Klay's at 51%. I think they both end up getting in, but I think Draymond will have a better case for the Hall of Fame than Klay Thompson will, although, like I said, I think both of them end up getting in. And then you start to get down to Andre Iguodala, who I don't think so. I think it'd be a pretty big reach to get Iguodala in.
Finals MVP?
Yeah, whatever.
Finals MVP?
But one name that you missed, honestly, it might be Andrew Wiggins. He has such a long career ahead of him. Is he a MVP or is he a Hall of Famer if he wins this title? No. But this is a guy who could play for, 15 years and average like 18 points a game. So he'll have a lot of the counting stats almost similar to he's not as good as his job as like Matt Stafford was. But you know how Stafford doesn't have really any of the accolades except now he's got a Super Bowl and he's all time high in all those counting
Right.
stats. I think that could be Wiggins to an extent where Wiggins is not going to be fifth in points like Stafford's going to be in touchdown passes, but just a guy who racks up a whole lot of stats without a lot of individual accolades, and then he'll top it off being an important piece of a championship team. Again, not a perfect comparison, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. And I don't know, I think there's a case to be made for Wiggins eventually getting in, and I think there's obviously there's going to be a case for Iguodala. I wouldn't put Iguodala in. I don't think like Bruce Bowen is in. You know, Bruce Bowen doesn't have a Finals MVP, but I don't think Bruce Bowen's in. I don't think Derek Fisher's going to get in. So I would put Iguodala in those category of guys, and not not a Hall of Famer. I almost hope he doesn't get in. Seems like a good enough guy, but that seems like a huge issue.
You talking about Andrew Wiggins' future career, but you forgetting Iguodala's past before when he was in Philadelphia and dropping 20 points a game, and he was the leading scorer on that team. He had a lot of offensive years before, moving on to win championships with the Golden State Warriors. That does play a factor, into his overall career average, obviously, to go along with a Finals MVP and 3, could be 4 NBA titles to go along with it. Do I think he's going to get in? No. I don't think Andre Iguodala will get in to the Hall of Fame.
One-time All-Star. And for his career, I know he had the career before where he was putting up points, but he's never averaged over 20. He was at 19.9 one year, so we'll give him 20 right there, and then at 18,
we round
and then
that up.
18, a couple years, almost 19. But for his career, he's 11 points a game. And I think Wiggins for his career is like 18 right now. And again, a lot of that's been marred.
Spent 6 years being,
Right, but even being the number one, like you can't get 20 points a game as the number one option. And, you're playing with Iverson for those first, handful of Philly years. And then when you were in Denver, that actually wasn't with Carmelo. I think that was with Chauncey and those guys.
No, I think that was with Chauncey still, though, right?
Yeah, that was Chauncey Billups. Because he was only in Denver a year, which I didn't know. I thought he was in Denver a lot longer. Jesus.
Now he's in Philly for what? 4 years?
No, he was in Philly for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. 8 years as a Sixer.
8 years. Okay.
And then 1 year as a Nugget.
So 8 years as a Sixer.
And then, in his 8 years as a Sixer, over 18 points a game 3 times, and just below 20. That one time. So I wouldn't have Iguodala in. Again, one-time All-Star, Finals MVP, 2-time All-Defensive Team. Whereas, honestly, like Andrew Wiggins and, there's still talk about Wiggins being, like, traded from the Warriors. So I know there's people that like to project about the future Warriors dynasty with Jonathan Kuminga and Jordan Poole and the fact that they're still going to have guys, like Moses Moody, Kevon Looney, and I imagine Steph will be a Warrior for his entire career. I don't think he's going anywhere. But with
all 3 of them shouldn't go anywhere. If you are Steph, Clay, or Draymond, there is no reason for you to leave San Francisco.
I know, but I think eventually,
especially Draymond,
I think eventually they'll want to not pay one of those guys, and it might be Klay Thompson with his injury history. But Wiggins a one-time All-Star as well, and it was this year he was an All-Star starter. So same as Iguodala in that respect, but for his career, he's at 19 points a game, and he might get his championship this year. It would be Iguodala's 4th championship, which would obviously put him a lot higher. But I don't know. I don't think either of them are going to get in, but I actually think Wiggins will have a more interesting case because he'll be more along the lines of, I guess, what you look at as like a typical individual Hall of Famer, if that makes sense. Whereas Iguodala, he's obviously getting it because he was part of the Warriors. Where I think Wiggins, if they win this championship, it will, of course, be added to his Hall of Fame resume, and it might even be the number 1 list, right? He was a champion in 2022 with the Warriors, but I think what you're going to point to with Wiggins will be, hey, he has 20,000. Not he doesn't have 20,000 points now, but just projecting, like, hey, he has 20,000 points. He has however many rebounds. He's one of the top 15 scorers of all. Just whatever it ends up being. I think that will be an interesting argument, and one that I would probably dismiss because, again, I don't think Andrew Wiggins is a Hall of Famer. He's been in the NBA for like 8-9 years now, and not once have I ever thought he was a Hall of Famer during these 8-9 years. So I'm not changing my tune on that now, but I do think it will be interesting because, as has been discussed, not by us, I guess it's about to be by us right now, but by everybody else who's ever talked about the Basketball Hall of Fame, it's not a very exclusive group. It is the easiest Hall of Fame to get into of the 4 major sports, and that's why we're even debating guys like Andre Iguodala and Andrew Wiggins, and frankly, kind of even a guy like Klay Thompson or Draymond Green. Whereas I think in other sports, like football specifically, I think there'd just be really no way that you would ever count a guy like Klay or like Draymond in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's hard to find a comparison, for football especially. For Dre, maybe it's something like a tight end who is phenomenal.
Is Klay like Wes Welker or something? Like, he was really good at this one thing. And I mean, Klay was good at defense too, but he was obviously part of championship teams. They're both white. I mean, you just
like Troy Brown, like those early New England Patriots, where like he was your receiver, but he also filled in at like safety for you and stuff to play defense when you needed him to, and he returned kicks as well. I think Klay. Look, as long as Klay doesn't fall off the cliff, as long as the 3-pointers keep falling, the offense is still between 15 and 22 points a game, and his defense is still, serviceable. I think the longevity of it all with titles and everything else, I think Klay joins Draymond and Steph as the 3 players that do get in to the Hall of Fame. Draymond to me just does so much that just doesn't get looked at by fans, but the reals know. And they know what he does for them defensively. They know what he allows Steph to be offensively with his passing ability and being a guy that will get you 7, 8, 9, 10 assists a game to go along with 7, 8, 9 rebounds a game and anywhere from, 7 to 15 points a game. He does so much to allow the Warriors to be the Warriors. It's a mix of them getting the perfect person and him landing in the perfect situation, because neither one of us, as much as we love Draymond coming out of Michigan State, neither one of us saw this as an even remote possibility for Draymond Green going into the NBA, that we'd even be having a discussion about him getting into the NBA Hall of Fame when his career is done. But being in the right situation and him being the right player for that mindset of defensively and as a teammate, it all worked out perfectly for Money Green. And I think when it's all said and done, he does join Steph, and I think Klay as well. I think all 3 of them will be in the Hall of Fame.
I think all 3 of them will be as well, and I want to make that clear. I know I was kind of dogging Klay's candidacy a little bit and propping up Andrew Wiggins. Klay Thompson makes the Hall of Fame 10 times out of 10 over Andrew Wiggins. I just want to make sure that's crystal clear on my end.
All right, well, hopefully 7-8 years from now, when Griffin and Bass is going for 7-8 years, we'll be able to talk about this. And
interviewing Klay Thompson at the Hall of Fame.
Exactly, there you go.
8 years ago, I said you weren't all.
Hopefully we'll have years to come. We're going to see you get punched in the face by Klay Thompson 8 years from now. Perfect. All right, that's got to do it for us. Next time we see you guys, it'll be right before Game 1 of the NBA Finals between the Boston Celtics and the Golden State Warriors. He's Ryan Griffin. I'm Matt Bassin. We on Throwin' Stones. Thank you for hanging out with us. We'll see you guys again real soon.
Man on a mission, I'ma get it. You know I be on a one.